The words still echo in my head. You're just a naive loser, Clara. You were never smart enough to understand what I was building. Francis said this while pocketing the keys to the car I helped him buy, walking away from 3 years together like I was nothing. Like the $70,000 of my savings that funded his precious drone patent was just pocket change. I'm Clara Holand, 32, and I work in clean energy finance. My father was an aerospace engineer before he passed, and he taught me that innovation comes from collaboration, not exploitation. I thought Francis Reed understood that. I thought the brilliant, handsome drone engineer I fell for actually valued my mind, not just my bank account. But as I watched him drive away that cold October evening, leaving me standing in the parking lot of the restaurant where he'd just destroyed my world, I realized something important. Francis thought he'd won. He thought he'd outsmarted the naive loser who'd believed in his dreams. He had no idea what was coming. It started 18 months ago at a private engineering forum. My late father's old aerospace colleagues still invited me to their quarterly meetings, partly out of respect for his memory, partly because they valued my financial insights on tech investments. Francis had been nervous about presenting his drone concept. What if they think it's stupid? He'd asked over breakfast, hands shaking slightly as he reviewed his notes. They won't, I assured him, straightening his tie. Your design is revolutionary. The way you've integrated the navigation system with the power efficiency algorithms is genius. His face lit up. You really think so? I know so. I've run the numbers, remember? The presentation went perfectly. My father's colleagues were impressed, asking technical questions that Francis answered with growing confidence. Afterward, Dr. Pearson, a decorated military engineer, pulled me aside. Your young man has something special there, he said. The foundation work looks solid. I beamed with pride. We make a good team. But when Dr. Pearson approached Francis later, I noticed something odd. Francis described the project as entirely his own conception, barely mentioning my contributions to the financial modeling and preliminary research. I shrugged it off. He was nervous, I told myself. People forget details when they're excited. Living frugally for 7 years as a finance professional taught me the value of every dollar. While my colleagues bought designer bags and expensive cars, I drove a reliable Honda and cooked meals at home. My savings account hit $70,000, money I'd planned to use for a house down payment. Then Francis's prototype hit a roadblock. The initial development required specialized components, legal fees for the patent application, and laboratory testing. His startup funds had dried up, and traditional investors wanted to see more progress before committing. I don't know what to do, he said one evening, slumped on my couch with his head in his hands. Without this funding, the whole project dies. 3 years of work, gone. My heart ached watching him suffer. This wasn't just his dream, it had become ours. I'd spent countless evenings helping him refine the business model, analyzing market data, and preparing investor presentations. How much do you need? I asked quietly. $70,000. But Clara, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. The relief in his eyes made me certain I was doing the right thing. We were building something together. This was an investment in our shared future. The next day, I transferred my entire nest egg into his business account. Just sign here, Francis said, sliding a document across my Kit Smith table. It's a filing waiver, standard paperwork for the patent office. I glanced at the dense legal text. What exactly does it do? Streamlines the process, reduces duplicate paperwork. He kissed my forehead. You trust me, right? Of course, I trusted him. I'd just given him my life savings. I signed without reading the fine print, a mistake that would haunt me for months. The patent application moved forward smoothly. Francis's name appeared as the primary inventor, with mine listed as a contributing researcher. The preliminary forms looked official and legitimate. I felt proud seeing our work documented formally. This is it, Francis said, holding the initial filing receipt. We're really doing this. But something nagged at me about that document I'd signed. When I asked to see a copy later, Francis claimed he'd already sent it to the lawyer. Standard procedure, he explained. They file everything together. I should have pressed harder. I should have demanded to see my copy. But I was caught up in the excitement of our shared success, blind to the trap being carefully constructed around me. The private investor dinner was supposed to be our moment. Francis had landed a meeting with 3 potential backers, including a venture capitalist known for funding breakthrough technologies. We'd practiced his pitch together, refining every detail. "You'll be there to vouch for the development timeline," he'd said. "Investors love hearing from the financial mind behind the project." I bought a new dress and researched each investor's background. This was our chance to turn the prototype into a real company. The day before the dinner, Francis called with disappointing news. "There's been a mix-up with the guest list. They can only accommodate the primary applicant tonight." "What do you mean?" "The venue has strict capacity limits. But don't worry, I'll mention your contributions." I sat alone in the hotel lobby that evening, watching successful people in expensive suits heading to the restaurant upstairs. Through the window, I could see Francis at a corner table, animated and charming, while 3 well-dressed investors hung on his every word. My phone buzzed with a text. "Going great. They love the concept. Staying late to discuss terms." He didn't come home until after midnight, reeking of expensive wine and success. "We did it, Clara. They're interested in a major investment." But I noticed he said "we" while I'd spent the evening eating room service alone. Francis referred to himself as the sole mind behind the invention. My friend Jessica mentioned casually over coffee. She'd been at a tech networking event where Francis had given an impromptu presentation. My stomach dropped. What exactly did he say? Something about being a self-taught innovator who developed the drone system from scratch. It was impressive, but I thought you'd helped with the financial modeling? I felt sick. When I confronted Francis that evening, he turned it around on me. "Jessica must have misunderstood," he said, his voice taking on that patient tone he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "Of course I mentioned your support. But Clara, you have to understand, investors want to hear about technical innovation, not financial analysis." "I did more than financial analysis. I helped develop the core concepts. You helped, yes, but the breakthrough ideas came from me." His expression softened, becoming almost pitying. "I think you might be overstating your contributions a bit." I found myself apologizing for questioning him, for doubting his version of events, for being sensitive. The manipulation was so smooth I didn't even recognize it happening. But a seed of doubt had been planted. I started paying closer attention to how Francis described our work to others. The celebration dinner should have been perfect. Francis had secured his first major investor, $500,000 in initial funding based on the patent application and prototype demonstrations. I'd helped make this possible, and I was excited to celebrate our achievement. But when I arrived at the upscale restaurant, I immediately sensed something was wrong. Francis sat at a table with 2 other people, his new investor and a stunning woman in a designer dress who clearly belonged in this world of wealth and influence. "Clara." Francis stood as I approached, but his smile seemed forced. "Everyone, this is Clara. Clara, meet Richard Blackstone and his daughter Victoria." Victoria Blackstone. I recognized the name. Tech heiress, venture capital royalty, the kind of person who could open doors Francis had only dreamed of. Throughout dinner, I felt increasingly invisible. The conversation revolved around topics I couldn't contribute to: exclusive country clubs, private jets, family connections in Silicon Valley. When I tried to mention my work on the project, Francis would subtly redirect the conversation. Then, over dessert, Francis dropped his bomb. "Clara, I think we need to talk about taking a break. You're just not on the same level anymore." The words hit like ice water. "What? This is my world now. And honestly, you don't fit." He left with Victoria Blackstone, leaving me alone with the check. I spent 3 days in my apartment, crying and trying to understand what had happened. The man I'd loved, supported, and believed in had discarded me like I was nothing. But anger slowly replaced heartbreak when I realized something crucial. I'd never received my copy of the final patent documentation. When I called the patent office, the clerk's words made my blood run cold. "I show only one inventor listed on this patent, Francis Reed. There's no Clara Holand in our records for this filing." "That's impossible. I was on the preliminary forms." "Ma'am, I can only tell you what's in the final documentation. Perhaps you're thinking of a different patent?" I hung up and immediately called the lawyer Francis had used. His assistant was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, but attorney-client privilege prevents me from discussing case details with anyone other than Mr. Reed." The document I'd signed, the filing waiver, had been a power of attorney. Francis had used it to remove my name from the patent entirely. My signature had been forged on the removal forms. I stared at my bank statement showing the $70,000 withdrawal, then at the patent filing that now bore only Francis's name. I'd been completely erased from my own innovation. But I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Marcus Webb was an intellectual property attorney I'd met during a green tech conference last year. He specialized in patent disputes and had mentioned his interest in cases involving inventor rights. When I called his office, he agreed to meet that same day. "This is fascinating," Marcus said after reviewing my documentation. "And sloppy, really sloppy work by their legal team." Sloppy how? Several issues. First, your preliminary forms clearly establish you as a co-inventor. Second, this power of attorney document you signed is improperly executed. It doesn't actually grant the authority they used. Third, the timeline of filings suggests fraudulent removal. My heart raced. "So I have a case?" "You have an excellent case. The question is, what do you want to achieve?" I thought about Francis's cruel words, his casual dismissal of my contributions, the way he'd made me feel worthless. I want my name back on the patent. I want recognition for my work, and I want him to face consequences for what he did. Marcus smiled grimly. "Then let's build a case he'll never forget." We agreed to work on contingency. Marcus would take a percentage of any settlement or damages awarded. The long game was about to begin. Research revealed something interesting. Francis hadn't always worked alone. Before our relationship, he'd had a collaborator named David Smith, who'd left the project abruptly 2 years ago. According to LinkedIn, David now worked as a freelance engineer in Vermont. When I called, David's voice was cautious but curious. "You're Francis's ex-fiancé? The one who funded the patent? You know about that?" Francis mentioned having a financial backer but never gave details. I assumed it was family money. David paused. "Look, I don't know what happened between you two, but Francis has a pattern of rewriting history." We arranged to meet in Burlington. David lived simply in a converted farmhouse, his workshop filled with elegant electronic prototypes. Over coffee, he told me his story. "Francis and I developed the core navigation algorithms together. I have all the original drafts, time-stamped files, everything. But when investor interest started growing, he pushed me out. Said I was thinking too small for what the project could become." "Do you still have the documentation?" David nodded toward a filing cabinet. "Every version, every revision, I kept it all because I knew someday the truth would matter." "Would you be willing to testify that Francis's patent isn't entirely original work?" David's smile was grim. "For justice? Absolutely." While building my legal case, I also discovered a crucial piece of evidence in my own files. During Francis's graduate school application process, I'd helped him write a thesis paper on autonomous navigation systems. My name appeared as co-author on the academic submission. The paper, published in the university's engineering journal, contained roughly 40% of the core concepts later used in Francis's patent. The ideas weren't just similar, they were identical, down to specific technical language and mathematical formulations. "This is incredibly valuable," Marcus explained. "It establishes prior publication of the concepts with your name attached. It also shows a clear pattern of collaborative work between you and Francis." I remembered those late nights working on the thesis, debating theoretical approaches, refining mathematical models. Francis had insisted we submit it together, saying my financial analysis strengthened the technical arguments. "You understand complex systems better than you realize," he'd told me then. "Your perspective makes my work better." Now that same work had been stolen and repackaged as his sole invention. But unlike the patent documentation, this academic paper was public record. Francis couldn't erase it, couldn't claim it didn't exist, couldn't forge documents to remove my name. The evidence was building into an unshakable foundation. Marcus filed our petition with the U.S. Patent Office on a Tuesday morning. The document was comprehensive, 37 pages of evidence, testimony, and legal arguments proving my rightful place as co-inventor. The petition detailed the fraudulent removal of my name, the forged signatures, the improper use of the power of attorney, and the academic prior art that established our collaborative relationship. David's testimony and documentation supported every claim. What happens now? I asked. Francis gets served with notice of the dispute. The patent office begins a formal review process, and everything freezes until they make a determination. That evening, I felt strangely calm. After months of anger and betrayal, I'd finally taken action. The truth was now part of the official record, beyond Francis's ability to manipulate or erase. My phone rang around 9 p.m. Francis's name appeared on the screen. I didn't answer. The voicemail he left was everything I needed to hear. Clara, what the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just destroy everything I've built. You're nothing, a nothing girl with spreadsheets and no vision. Drop this lawsuit or you'll regret it. I saved the recording immediately. His own words would become evidence of his character and motivations. Marcus was right. This case was going to be easier than expected. The patent dispute triggered an unexpected chain reaction. Richard Blackstone, Francis's primary investor, had included a disclosure clause in their investment contract, requiring notification of any ownership disputes or legal challenges related to the company's intellectual property. Francis had failed to disclose our dispute. According to the contract, this constituted material misrepresentation and breach of fiduciary duty. Blackstone is furious, Marcus reported after speaking with the investor's legal team. He's initiating an internal audit of the entire company structure. If the audit confirms fraudulent representation, there could be significant financial penalties. The audit would examine every aspect of Francis's business, from financial records to the patent documentation itself. Independent experts would verify the timeline of invention, the legitimacy of my removal, and the accuracy of all representations made to investors. Meanwhile, the patent office dispute meant Francis couldn't license the technology or sell patent rights until the matter was resolved. His business model depended entirely on the patent's value. Without clear ownership, he couldn't move forward with any commercial applications. The $500,000 investment was effectively frozen, locked in accounts, pending resolution of the legal questions surrounding the company's primary asset. Francis's empire was grinding to a halt, piece by piece. The timing couldn't have been worse for Francis. His company had been negotiating a major contract with a military contractor, a deal worth potentially millions in revenue. But the patent dispute triggered the contractor's standard intellectual property review process. Military contracts require absolute clarity on technology ownership. Any hint of disputed intellectual property automatically disqualifies a company from consideration, regardless of the technology's merit. The contract has been suspended pending resolution of patent ownership questions, Marcus informed me after receiving notification from the contractor's legal department. This wasn't just about money, it was about credibility. News of the suspended military contract would spread through the small community of defense contractors. Other potential clients would hesitate to engage with a company facing intellectual property disputes. The patent that was supposed to make Francis's fortune was now actively destroying his business prospects. Every day the dispute continued, his reputation suffered more damage. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I'd loved Francis once, believed in his dreams, wanted us to succeed together, but he'd chosen to build his empire on lies and theft. The consequences were entirely of his own making. While Francis's world crumbled, I was quietly building something new. David Smith and I had formed an unofficial partnership, working to develop an improved version of the drone navigation system. This time, everything would be done ethically, with clear documentation and shared credit. "Your financial modeling approach is brilliant," David said during one of our video calls. "You're seeing optimization possibilities I never considered." We were developing something genuinely superior to Francis's original design. Where his system relied on brute force processing, ours used elegant algorithms that reduced power consumption by 30% while improving accuracy. The University Tech Incubator in Burlington had offered us workspace and access to their prototyping facilities. Unlike Francis's secretive approach, we documented every decision, every breakthrough, every contribution from each team member. This is how innovation should work, I told David. Transparent, collaborative, honest. My father would have been proud. He'd always believed that the best engineering came from teams of people respecting each other's expertise. I was finally building something that honored his memory and his values. The preliminary results were extraordinary. Our system outperformed Francis's design in every measurable category. Dr. Pearson, my father's old colleague, agreed to serve as an expert witness. His testimony would be crucial. A decorated military engineer with 40 years of experience, vouching for my technical contributions and collaborative role in the original development. I remember those early conversations clearly, Dr. Pearson told Marcus during deposition preparation. Clara was instrumental in the conceptual development. Her questions pushed Francis to refine his thinking, and her financial analysis shaped the practical applications. The deposition took place in a sterile conference room downtown. Dr. Pearson spoke with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades evaluating technical innovations for military applications. In my professional opinion, the navigation system's foundation clearly emerged from collaborative brainstorming sessions that included Ms. Holand as a primary contributor. Her removal from the patent documentation appears to be fraudulent revision of established facts. His testimony dismantled Francis's narrative of solo innovation. Here was a respected expert with no financial stake in the outcome, confirming that I'd been an integral part of the original development. Marcus looked satisfied as we left the deposition. Expert testimony from someone of Dr. Pearson's caliber carries enormous weight with patent office reviewers. The net was closing around Francis's lies. The arbitration hearing took place in a federal building downtown. Francis arrived with 2 expensive lawyers and a confident expression that faltered when he saw the evidence Marcus had prepared. Exhibit A, Marcus announced, preliminary patent filing showing Miss Holand as co-inventor. Exhibit B, the power of attorney document improperly executed and fraudulently used. Exhibit C, academic paper co-authored by Miss Holand containing core patent concepts. Exhibit D, original development notes in Miss Holand's handwriting. But the most damning evidence was Exhibit E, a series of emails between Francis and his lawyer discussing how to remove my name from the patent. One email was particularly devastating. Clara will never notice the change until it's too late. She's too trusting to question the paperwork. The federal arbitrator, a stern woman with 30 years of intellectual property experience, examined each document carefully. When she reached the forged signature, removing my name from the patent, her expression darkened. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly, "did you personally sign this document removing Miss Holand as co-inventor?" Francis's lawyer whispered frantically in his ear. The legal team handled all documentation." "That's not what I asked. Did you personally sign this specific document?" The silence stretched for nearly a minute. "Yes. Were you authorized to do so by Miss Holand?" Another pause. "The power of attorney." "The power of attorney was improperly executed and doesn't grant such authority." Francis's face went pale. The patent office ruling arrived on a Wednesday morning. Marcus called me immediately, barely containing his excitement. We won. Complete victory. The decision was comprehensive and brutal for Francis. The patent office found clear evidence of fraudulent removal of a co-inventor, improper use of legal documents, and material misrepresentation in the patent application process. My name was restored to the patent as co-inventor with equal rights to all current and future licensing, royalties, and commercial applications. Francis could no longer make any patent-related decisions without my consent. But the ruling went further. The Patent Office also imposed penalties for the fraudulent filing, including a formal reprimand that would appear in all future patent applications Francis might submit. "There's more," Marcus continued. "Blackstone's legal team contacted me this morning. The investment contract included a clause about material misrepresentation. Francis now owes $3.5 million in damages personally, not through the company." I sat in my Kit Smith, reading the official ruling, feeling strangely empty. I'd won everything I'd fought for, but victory felt different than I'd expected. My phone buzzed with a text from Francis. "You've destroyed everything. I hope you're happy." I wasn't happy. I was just satisfied that the truth had finally caught up. With my newly restored patent rights, I could now force a board vote at Francis's company. As co-owner of the foundational intellectual property, I had legal standing to demand representation in corporate decisions. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. Blackstone and the other investors were already angry about the fraud revelations. The suspended military contract and frozen funding had eliminated any confidence in Francis's leadership. The vote is essentially a formality, Marcus explained. With the patent dispute resolved in your favor and the breach of contract confirmed, the board has no choice but to remove Francis from operational control. I wouldn't be taking over the company. I had no interest in running Francis's business. Instead, the board would likely dissolve the entity and liquidate assets to pay outstanding debts and legal obligations. Francis's dream company, built on stolen intellectual property and lies, would simply cease to exist. The irony was perfect. He'd thought he was so clever, manipulating me and stealing my contributions, but his own greed and dishonesty had made his empire impossibly fragile. One legal challenge had brought it all crashing down. Friday's board meeting lasted less than an hour. The vote was unanimous. Francis Reed was removed as CEO and barred from any future involvement with the company. 6 months later, I made an unusual purchase. The luxury apartment Francis had always talked about buying, his empire headquarters, where he'd planned to host investors and close major deals, came up for sale when his financial situation collapsed. I bought it with cash, using money from the patent settlement and licensing fees from our improved drone system. But I never moved in. Instead, I converted the space into fellowship housing for women in STEM fields starting their own companies. The apartment that was supposed to symbolize Francis's dominance became a launching pad for female entrepreneurs who faced the same dismissive attitudes I'd encountered. The Clara Holand Innovation Fellowship provided 6 months of free housing, mentorship, and seed funding for women developing technology solutions. Applications poured in from across the country. The first fellow was Maya Patel, a biomedical engineer developing low-cost diagnostic equipment for rural clinics. The second was Jennifer Kim, working on renewable energy storage systems. Both had been overlooked by traditional venture capital firms. "You're giving us something more valuable than money," Maya told me during our first mentorship meeting. "You're giving us credibility and space to prove ourselves." Francis's fantasy apartment was now helping women achieve dreams he tried to destroy. The Ethics and Innovation Award ceremony took place at the National Academy of Engineering in Washington, D.C. I hadn't expected to be nominated, but the patent case had attracted attention from organizations promoting integrity in technology development. My acceptance speech was simple. Build things you can be proud of. Document your contributions. Respect your collaborators. That way, no one can take your work from you. The audience, hundreds of engineers, researchers, and technology leaders, responded with sustained applause. Afterward, several people approached me with their own stories of intellectual property theft and workplace manipulation. "You fought back," a young researcher told me. "You showed us it's possible to win against people who think they can steal our work." I'd become an accidental symbol of resistance against the exploitation that was rampant in technology industries. The case had implications far beyond my personal situation with Francis. During the reception, I noticed a familiar figure across the room. Victoria Blackstone was there with her father, both looking uncomfortable when they spotted me. She approached cautiously. "Clara, I wanted to apologize. I had no idea about what Francis had done to you." I nodded politely. "You couldn't have known." For what it's worth, my father never invested in another project without thorough background checks after what happened. David and I were in the final stages of preparing our new company for launch. Holand Dynamics had already received preliminary interest from NASA for our improved navigation systems. The space agency's requirements for reliability and efficiency made our design particularly attractive. "It's funny," David said as we reviewed the latest test results. Francis always talked about changing the world, but he was so focused on personal glory that he couldn't see the bigger picture. Our system was genuinely revolutionary. By prioritizing collaboration over competition, we'd achieved breakthroughs that neither of us could have reached alone. The technology was cleaner, smarter, and more cost-effective than anything currently available. The NASA contract was just the beginning. We'd also received inquiries from agricultural companies interested in precision farming applications, environmental research organizations studying climate change, and search and rescue operations needing reliable navigation in challenging conditions. "Your father would be proud," David told me as we signed the NASA preliminary agreement. "This is exactly the kind of innovation he believed in, technology that serves humanity rather than ego." I thought about my father often during these milestones. He'd taught me that the best engineering emerged from teams of people respecting each other's contributions. I was finally building something that honored those values. 1 year after the patent ruling, I received an unexpected visitor. Francis appeared at my office on a rainy Thursday afternoon, looking older and worn down. His confident swagger had been replaced by something resembling humility. "I wanted to return this," he said, placing a framed document on my desk. It was our original prototype sketch, the napkin drawing we'd made together at a coffee shop 3 years ago, now professionally mounted behind glass. "I kept it because it reminded me of when we were actually partners," he said quietly, "before I messed everything up." I studied his face, looking for traces of the manipulative man who'd stolen my work and called me a naive loser. Instead, I saw someone genuinely broken by the consequences of his choices. "I never needed revenge, Francis," I told him. "I just needed the truth to catch up." He nodded slowly. "I know that now. I also know it's too late to fix what I broke between us." "Yes, it is." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Your new company, the NASA contract. Congratulations. You deserved that success." After he left, I sat looking at the framed sketch for a long time, remembering when we genuinely worked together, before greed and ego corrupted everything. A junior engineer at Holand Dynamics approached me during our quarterly company meeting. "Miss Holand, weren't you part of Reed Tech once? I read about it in a case study for my engineering ethics class." I smiled, thinking about how strange it was to have my story taught in universities as an example of fighting intellectual property theft. "No," I replied. "I fixed what they broke." The young woman looked confused. "But the article said you co-founded that company?" "I contributed to the technology that became the foundation for several companies. Reed Tech was built on lies and theft. We built something better." Later that day, I walked through our new facility, a bright, open space where engineers collaborated freely, where everyone's contributions were documented and credited, where innovation emerged from respect rather than exploitation. Holand Dynamics now employed 47 people, all working on projects that would genuinely improve the world. Our navigation systems were helping NASA explore Mars, enabling farmers to reduce pesticide use, and allowing rescue teams to find lost hikers in remote wilderness areas. This was what Francis and I could have built together if he'd chosen partnership over dominance. Instead, he destroyed our relationship and his own future for the illusion of sole credit. 3 years after that horrible dinner where Francis called me a naive loser, I was standing on a stage at the International Aerospace Conference, accepting an innovation award for our navigation system's role in successful Mars rover missions. The audience included some of the most brilliant engineers and scientists in the world. Dr. Pearson was in the front row, beaming with pride. David sat with our engineering team, all of us wearing matching company polo shirts, a small gesture that symbolized our commitment to shared success. This achievement belongs to everyone who believed that collaboration creates better outcomes than competition, I said into the microphone. Innovation thrives when we value integrity over ego, when we document truth rather than rewrite history, and when we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down. The applause was thunderous. Later at the reception, a young woman approached me, a recent graduate working for an aerospace startup. "Your story inspired me to start my own company," she said. "When my former boss tried to take credit for my work, I remembered your case and fought back. I won." I smiled, realizing this was the true victory. Not the patent ruling, not the financial settlement, not even the successful company David and I had built. The real triumph was inspiring others to value themselves, protect their contributions, and refuse to be erased by people who mistake manipulation for intelligence. Francis had thought he was destroying a naive loser. Instead, he'd created someone who would spend her career ensuring that other brilliant people never suffered what I'd endured. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear.